guys, welcome to Rust Rescue. My name is Vince.
And I'm Leanne. On this show, we're going to teach you how to find a classic car that's a total rust bucket, like this baby here, and fix it up on your own in your own garage for very little money. You can take it to your local car show or just enjoy it on a Sunday drive. Nothing fancy, but give you a project to have fun with.
When we come back, we're going to show you our latest project that we got from Carolina Barn Finds up in Asheboro, North Carolina.
We'll see you in a minute.
This segment brought to you by, for service and integrity since 1976, it's the National Parts Depot. Visit online, npdlink.com. Order today.
For all your radio and communication needs, go to racingelectronics.com.
We use Quantum Towing for all our towing needs. Call 980-328-4160. Iron Thunder Saloon. Find out why it's become the locals' favorite.
Welcome back to Rust Rescue. Vince, where did you find this total rust bucket? I mean, this thing is like a tetanus shot waiting to happen.
We got this from Danny over at Carolina Barn Finds in Asheboro, North Carolina. He's got everything from project cars to decorative stuff you can put in the garage, even gas pumps, old antique gas pumps.
Oh, cool.
Got some great stuff there. I go there and I have a field day.
I can imagine. So if you're looking to build a new car, or if you just want some cool signs and decor for your garage, you got to check out Carolina Barn Finds on the web and on Facebook. So Vince, what exactly is this? It looks like it might be an old Pontiac?
According to the numbers we ran online, this is a Pontiac Le Mans with a GTO package.
Now, what does the GTO package mean?
Basically, a GTO package is upgraded interior. They take out the bench seat, put in buckets, center console, and they go with the bigger motor. It used to be the 400 with a tri-pack with the three carburetors on it.
Okay. Well, since the interior is completely gone anyway, but the motor looks like it's in pretty good shape here.
Motor is extremely clean. We've done almost nothing to it aside from starting to disassemble it. And we were going to pull it out and reseal it and clean it all up and get all the grease and gunk out of it.
Well, it looks pretty clean.
Yeah,
it's real. These heads look really clean.
I took a look at some of the valve stems. They look good, so we don't have to do a valve job on it, which is pretty good. Timing chain even looks brand new. Somebody's rebuilt this motor before we got it.
Now, does it run?
Oh, it runs. It runs better than my car outside.
That's always something when you're starting with a project car. Before you completely tear it apart, check and see if it actually runs, because that's going to make a big difference in what you have to do to the car and how much money you're going to have to spend.
Make sure it runs, make sure it doesn't smoke, and make sure it doesn't leak. Those are the three main things.
So once you've determined that the motor's in good shape, what's the first thing that you want to do in starting a project like this, Vince?
Well, like what we did, we took the front nose off the car. Which is,
obviously.
Yeah, that's a little bit in-depth in its own because everything's rusted, rotted, frozen.
I bet that was a lot of fun. You had to get out the big giant pry bar to break loose some of the bolts.
I got to use the hammer.
Oh, the hammer.
I like my hammer.
Make sure you have a good hammer.
Yes. Good thing to have is a bolt cutter. It's a little tool that just cuts through the nuts and bolts because you're not going to be able to save them. There's no way.
No, definitely there's not much salvageable in here other than the motor.
Once you get it down to that point, you'll be able to see the different rots and rusts and all that stuff that's on the car. And some of the fun stuff we found in the corner there.
Yeah, it looks like a colony of animals of some sort have made a nest here in the suspension components. I think you dislodged the local ecology when you rescued this car.
I'm afraid like a beaver is going to come out of there when I chisel that thing up. But once we get that apart, I mean, and I'm going to try to duct tape the tires. You think, I mean, we should be able to fix those, no?
Yeah, we might be able to reuse those.
But once we get all that together, yeah. We have a lot of rust that we've got to figure out how to fix. Luckily, a lot of this is surface rust. It's not all the way down in the cowl. It's just the top part of it, but we do have a little bit of rust around the windshield that has to be fixed. Otherwise, that's not going to seal. We have our work cut out for us. I would like to at least take off the drum brakes that are in the front of this car and go disc. They do have kits for that. Again, we'll show more of that at a later episode.
That'd be a good upgrade.
Yeah.
Make the car a little bit safer.
It'll be a little safer. I've got a pretty much paint everything. What I like to do is I usually will pull the motor, paint the motor, put it back in. We don't have to do that with this, being that we have all this room. But definitely paint the motor, go with the Pontiac blue it's supposed to be.
Great.
And then just get in there with some scrub brushes, some wire brushes, some turpentine, clean the frame down and give it a good coat of paint. This way, when people look at this car, when you have the hood open at car shows, it looks like at least it's clean all the way under. No one's going to crawl under your car.
Well, sounds like we've got a lot of work to do, a lot of elbow grease, so why don't we get to it?
Let's go.
Now, we've already stripped out the entire interior of this car. And as you can see, these old interiors, they have some really nasty stuff in here. So we recommend that anytime you're working on these old cars that you wear one of these little dust masks, because you don't want to be inhaling all of that probably cancer-causing stuff or any of the dust. You should also wear protective gloves because, as we said, this thing is a tetanus shot waiting to happen, and you always want to be safe. Now, I think Vince is inside checking out the floor pans and seeing how much of that rust we're going to need to cut out. So let's see what he's doing.
As you can see, we had our floorboard all cut out. We'll be able to cut it out down to the good metal, like we had mentioned earlier. We did find out that the kick pan has to be basically redone. We've got a little bit of rot somewhere in that area over there. When you're cutting this out, you got to be careful not to cut your braces. You've got a brace here and a brace here. We cut it just before the brace, which also helps us out with our mounts for the seat. We don't have to worry about retreading any mounts here. What we're going to do is let's drill out the holes that we're going to use to weld the floorboard in, resize the floorboard, cut it, and get it welded in. Let's get going. One thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you get all the rust, all the paint, everything that's on this metal off. If you do not do that, you will not get a good weld. You want to get it back down to the metal, back down to the shiny metal, at least as far back as you're going to be placing the floor pan. This takes a little time. I prefer to use a wire brush myself. A lot of guys use a grinder. It really doesn't matter what you use, as long as you get it clean. All right. Got the floorboard all cut out. We cleaned up the metal with the wire brush, and what we did is we cut the floor pan to fit. Now what we're going to do is, what I'm actually doing now, is putting a couple of self-cutting bolts in the beam that you saw here, and a couple just strategically around the metal, just to keep it in place for when we weld it. We want to keep it as far down to the brace that you saw underneath that beam that's under there, so that when we go under the car, we can tack it up from there. Looks like it's all in place pretty good. Let's weld this baby. All right, like we said earlier, we were going to only change the one floor pan in this car. As you can see, we found a little bit of rust in here on the toe pan, so we're going to basically try and patch that. I'm not thinking it's going to work very well, but if worse comes to worse, we'll replace the whole toe and kick pan with another piece and then attach it to this. That's why we didn't actually weld all that in. So let's cut that out and see how that works. like we showed you earlier, see how bad the metal is here? I'm not sure if you can get a good shot of this. So we cut it down to the good metal. If you don't have solid metal, the weld is never going to hold. This is actually a little brittle. Down here, we've cut a nice size hole there. Next, we're going to have to cut a piece of sheet metal and put it in place.
Hey, Vince! What are you working on back here?
Well, we decided to try to cut some of this old metal off. I just made the last cut, and I found some real fun stuff.
Oh, lovely.
Look at that.
Wow, that rust has gone all the way through here. Are we going to be able to salvage this piece?
Yeah, we can actually make a piece out of here. I'm going to try to find out if anybody makes this yet. If not, we'll build it. We'll just bend some metal, bend some pipe, whatever we need. This is actually a standard problem that these cars have. The second they came off the showroom floor back in the 70s, water started seeping into there.
Nice, good seals.
I tell you, it's just the wonders that these cars actually are still around.
What else are we going to need to do back here? It looks like the trunk is a little scary looking as well.
Yeah, that trunk is actually pretty much done. What we're going to have to do here is drop the gas tank, get that out of the way, find all the welds on the beams that are under there, which once we find them, we grind them down, pop out this trunk panel and put a new trunk panel in. But you do not want to cut the beams on this. If you cut those beams, the gas tank won't go back in.
That would be a problem.
Yeah, and I've seen people do that. I've actually gotten calls where people have said the gentleman cut completely through the trunk pan and through all the beams, and the gas tank fell out, and I can't figure out how to put it in now.
Great.
It's fixable, but it's probably 3 or 4 weeks worth of work to redo the beam work and all that stuff. It's just unnecessary work. On this car, I can see it.
Right, because it's rusted through, we can actually see where those beams are.
So we've got the beams. I'm hoping the beams are okay on this one. Once we get that done, you want to check your gas tank out while you have it out. Make sure that there's no rust or sediment in the gas tank too. I mean, you got to realize this car's been sitting with gas in it for 10 years. Ugh. So that gas is probably like varnish.
Yeah, how do you get rid of that gas and dispose of it safely, or are we probably just going to have to get a whole new gas tank and dispose of the whole thing?
We probably either have to get a whole new gas tank, or there are certain radiator companies that can boil the tank out and they do a glass lining on it. I would say it's probably cheaper just to buy a new gas tank.
Okay. It sounded like it.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to do if you want to keep everything original. There are some people that go overboard. They really want everything original. That's not what we're about here.
No.
We want to show, like we said before, how you can take this car down to a regular car show and win a trophy maybe. But keep it where you can afford to build it.
And something that you can enjoy driving.
Exactly. So,
all right, well, sounds like we've got a lot of measuring and cutting to do, but remember, measure twice, cut once. So let's get to it.
All right. All right, guys, welcome back. We've got the trunk pan completely cut out of this car, saving all of the beams to make sure we didn't cut those. Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to fabricate a nice flat bottom trunk with this car. You can go to places like Year One NPD, probably Jegs probably has it too, and get pre-made trunk pans that'll go in with a little bit of cutting. I like flat because we're going to be doing a pretty extensive audio system in this car, and it's going to need a little less of all those nooks and crannies that you see there. Once we get that all fabricated, we're going to weld it in. So first thing we have to do before all that is clean up all the edges where we're going to be doing the welding so that we have a clean metal to go with the metal on the trunk pan that we're building. Once we get that all done, we'll weld the trunk pan in and take it from there. Let's get to it.
Okay, guys, we've got the trunk all cleaned up. We've got all of the rust off, or most of it at least. We're going to be making the trunk pan. What it is, I already cut part of it. The best thing I can suggest to do is get yourself some oak tag, or I guess whatever you want, you guys call this. Make a pattern of it. Go on all the different angles. Lay this over your tin and just trace it up, and then using tin snips, just cut it right out. We'll put that aside for now. This is the final product. You've got all the stuff cut. You've got a little bit of the bend. The bending you will do with a hammer. You can buy a set of metal hammers roughly for about $20, $30 at most of the different tool stores. Once you get that all molded in, what we're going to do is we're going to screw it in place first. This way it's held down to the beams, and we'll be able to actually tack weld it to each of the beams so that it'll give it a little more strength. And then we'll go back in and we'll do the rest of the welding. Let's give that a shot. All right, once you get all of the screws in, we're going to go underneath the car and we're going to mark off the lines on each side of the beams. Then what you do is you take out your screws again. That's why you don't put too many of them in. And we're going to mark right next to each of them so that when we can make the drill holes to weld in the actual trunk pan onto the beams themselves. Unless you make those holes, you're pretty much going to be drilling into midair. Sometimes you'll make all kinds of holes in it that you don't really need. So once again, make your lines from underneath, flip it over, and make 5 or 6 drill holes down each of the beams on each side, and this way we can spot weld them in. Let's give that a shot. Okay guys, here's the reason that we actually do the markings from underneath. This is the underside where we marked it. Now you can, as you can see, we know exactly where the beams are. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill probably every 6 inches, drill a nice hole here and go the same way on each side of this. This way when we put this back on, we're going to, from the other side, tack weld it, each one of them. And this way, this is as flush up to the beam as we can possibly get it. Best thing I would suggest is use about a 1/4 inch drill bit. You don't want to get too big of a hole because you don't want to burn through too much of it. Always remember, make sure this is clean before you put it back in, and make sure that you got all the rust off of those beams as well. Let's give it a shot. Okay, we've got the trunk pan laid in. As you can see, all the holes line up with the beams underneath. Now what we're going to do is tack it in place. Always remember, tack from the center of the pan out. This way, if you need to bend it a little bit, if you need to get it closer, you can do that. If you tack from the outside in, what'll happen is it'll work like a sling. Once you get it to the center, if they're not lined up right way, it's going to be a lot harder to bend that piece in. Let's give this thing tacked in. There you go. Looks pretty good so far. Okay, as you can see, trunk's pretty solid. We have to finish welding it in. What we're going to do in the back here, as opposed to trying to go with the contour of the trunk line that's there now, we're just going to go with a complete slope up, and it's going to go right up that way and back towards the back seat. We may do a back seat delete on this car. We're not really sure. This way we'll get rid of all the excess stuff that we're never going to use, and maybe do a little bit of design work inside into the back trunk here. Back here will be where most of the audio components are going to go once we get them all figured out. But in the meantime, we'll get that all welded in and all ready to go.